Welcome to this video, and we're going to be looking at the Ace of Discs here on the left. In the previous video I did the Fool, and the Ace of Discs, very much like the Fool, is a radical departure from its counterpart in the Rider-Waite deck. So for the Ace of Discs we've also got a change of name as well as a change of glyph from the Rider-Waite card here on the right. Pentacles have also been called coins, and Crowley wanted to get away from the connotations that were associated with pentacles and coins. So we'll look at that change in more detail, as well as lots of other bits of symbolism. This is one of the more complex of the minor arcana cards. As you can see in the coming video, I've got lots to talk about, but I'm going to go through the divinatory meanings of these, or at least the Thoth version first, and then for those of you that want to move on to the more esoteric aspects of this card, there's lots of information to come after that. So when looking at the divinatory meanings of the Ace of Discs, like any of the discs in the Thoth tarot deck, they are really the seed or the potential or the essence of that particular element. It's not that that element, whether it be fire, water, air, or in this case earth, are actually manifest. It's more that they have the potential. So how does that relate to divinatory meaning? Well, that means that we have the all potential to start with. So we have a potential to get something really good out of the reading that the ace appears in, unless it's reversed, and then it's really only a delay. And they also represent both inner and outer growth, particularly in the Thoth deck, and we can see that in the Ace of Discs as I go on in the video. So for upright position for the Ace of Discs, it could represent a new job or business adventure, or looking at new sources of finance, because the discs are about materialization. As I said, with that being the seed, it's not necessarily anything concrete at this time, but there's a potential opportunity. So it's a good time to look for a new job or something new that is practical and inspiring. It could mean a sudden input of funds, or another way to look at this is to send out positive vibes, to get yourself in a positive mindset that your life can create abundance that will sustain you. I put sustain you there because, as we'll see from the rest of the video, it's not necessarily about accumulating loads of wealth, it's really your attachment to it. And a new beginning in terms of starting a new interest, but something with a practical element to it. So time to work on something tangible rather than the abstract, learning a new skill, for example. And that could even mean learning tarot, because it is something that doesn't just stay in your head. I've put a line here because these are like traditional meanings for the Ace of Discs in the Rider-Waite deck, but in the Thoth deck he really wants us to look a bit more deeply. And Crowley is keen to point out also the relationship of man with nature, and he's mentioned this in his Book of Thoth. And this alludes to a greater understanding of ourselves through our observation of nature, the seasons, and becoming more in harmony with it. And as we'll see, there is lines of symmetry and harmony within the card itself. So he is talking about both inner and outer growth, because he says that there's nothing wrong per se with wealth and materialism. It's really just our relationship and attachment to it. And I've said here, not being attached to wealth or materialism, but rather using it for our internal and external growth, because the discs are all about the growth of the self. It's not usually put that way in readings. It's like, oh, you could get loads of money, but really it's just another form of growth of the individual, and in a constructive way. For example, using our work as a support for our spiritual studies rather than an end in itself, seeing how it can be of service to others. So, I may rather than just work as a means of getting a brand new 4K HD TV, I might actually, plough it into something which will broaden my spiritual horizons, for example. So these are some of the ways that the Ace of Discs can appear in a reading when it's in the upright or dignified position. We'll now go on to the reversed position. I mentioned in the previous section that if the Ace of Discs is reversed, it could just mean a delay in some of the positive aspects that are associated with the upright position, such as unexpected finance, a new job opportunity or business adventure. But other associations with the reversed position of the Ace of Discs can include something which may not materialize at all, rather than being delayed. It also suggests being careful about one's income and expenditure to make sure that one's income or one's wealth and material status is just not being drained away, because the reverse position does indicate something is going awry. Could mean being blinded by greed and exploiting others for your own gains. Depends where this comes up. I mean, if it comes up in the external environment, it could be that you are the victim of that's external environment in the Celtic cross spread. Or just seeing work as an end in itself without really having anything constructive in terms of growth of your inner self as part of the process. Being out of touch with nature and a lack of harmony with one's surroundings. And lacking a desire or confidence to look for better financial opportunities for yourself. So these are some of the topics associated with a reversed Ace of Discs. I'm now going to look at all the symbolism associated with this card, and then we'll apply it all to a Celtic cross at the end. The Ace of Discs is associated with the number 1, and as we saw in the Ace of Wands, in terms of geometry and numerology, we have the name monad. Mono meaning one, so we have the point. It's complete unto itself. There's no parts. It really is just an essence. So it doesn't actually even contain the element of discs. It's just the pregnant potential for that suit to express itself. So it's not until we move out of the one into the rest of the suit that we get expression for this particular element, and that's where we get the divinatory meanings of potential and how they are derived. It's all coming from the numerological aspect of this particular card. The next section relates to the Ace of Discs and the Tree of Life. So it's associated, as well as the Ace of Wands and all of the other aces, with B.O.T.A at the top of the Tree of Life. And in fact, going back to the original picture here, it is a Tree of Life of sorts, with B.O.T.A at the top and Malkut at the bottom, because we're looking at that spiritualization of matter, that energy of spirit going into the most material aspect of the creation. So rather like in the previous section where we talked about the indivisibility of the point, or the number 1, B.O.T.A is actually the hidden intelligence of the creation. That's the title for it. It's the hidden intelligence, that unity, that potential, that seed and source of creation. It's complete unto itself. It's also called a hidden intelligence because it's incomprehensible to us and beyond consciousness. And the primary symbol of Keter is the crown here. So the crown, when it sits on a person, it's above everything, it's above the person, but it's, in a sense, it's above and yet a part of the unified whole. So a monarch wearing a crown is like a head of state. They pass the rules, they direct the people historically, and therefore, in the same sense as a true monarch or traditional monarch would do, wearing a crown, Keter, in terms of the Ace of Discs, would provide the potential for the rules of the rest of the suit and its expression down the Tree of Life to Malkut and the Ten of Discs here. The other archetype of Keter is the Point, but we've already talked about that. Also, in terms of the Tree of Life, the Ace of Discs has to be looked at in terms of the 4 worlds. So there's 4 different worlds, each associated with different suits, and the Keter that we talked about is in Asaya, which is the last world of manifestation, and we had the Ace of Wands here in Keter in Aslut. So, as I said, Asaya here is the last world of manifestation and action. But Crowley also, as I intimated in the divinatory meanings, associates the Ace of Discs with more than just the material aspects of life here, which Asaya is associated with. And he says, this card is thus an affirmation of the identity of Sol, which means the sun, and Terra, which is the earth. And that will be best understood by those who have punctually practiced Liber-Resh for the necessary number of years, preferably in such hermitage as those of the Sahara Desert, sun, where the sun and the earth can soon be instinctively recognized as living beings, one's constant companions in a universe of pure joy. So, you know, people associate Crowley with all sorts of negative stuff, but what he's essentially saying here, and what the glyph of the card is all about, as I said at the beginning, is the interaction between the sun, these yellow bits, and the earth. And the earth is not just a passive, dense material thing. He's saying that no, it's not that at all. It's something which is very active, which we need to get to grips with. And certainly in 2018, when I'm shooting this video, certainly in the UK, we're having a big thing on plastic and the environment, and man is looking at the consequences of his actions of previous decades of abuse. I'm using this diagram here for the astrology, but it's sort of a mix of Rider-Waite and Thoth because it talks about pentacles, but it's the same thing here for the Ace of Discs. The Ace of Discs takes rulership of Aries here, it's on the outside quadrant, and it finishes at the end of Gemini, and that's above the North Pole. And as you can see, it's in line with the Princess of Discs, because the Ace of Discs is said to sit on the throne of the Princess of Discs. So it doesn't occupy a decan as the minor arcana do, and the court cards are even more complex because they're a mixture of different decans, but rather it's the outer quadrant here between Aries and Gemini where its astrological rulership lies. This is a longer section on the symbolism of the card, and we'll look just very briefly, that there is a symmetry to it. If we take the actual disc or the center of the disc out, there is a vertical symmetry here and a horizontal symmetry here, which is partially transparent, so you can see through. So the symmetry does imply trying to go forward with a certain sense of balance in your life, because each side of the symmetry axis here we have an equality of energy. I've divided the symbolism of this card into that which is external to this central disc and that within the disc. So I'll look at the external parts first, and we can see that there's a background here which is emerald green flecked with yellow. The emerald green is significant, and Crowley says that this is the emerald green of spring, which is making this earth suit active, and therefore this disc dynamic and not static as a coin or pentacle would be. And this represents the new Eon of Horus and the interaction between the sun and the earth as living beings. It says that there are 6 pairs of wings, and it took me a while to work this out. We've got one pair here, another pair here, that's the horizontal, 3 here, 4 here, but the other pair of wings is actually in the background here, which is sheltering. If you think of this as in the foreground and this in the background, these lines are going this way at the top and they're going the opposite way at the bottom, so these are in fact wings of vegetation as well. So it's 6 pairs of wings, which is the number of the sun, because that is associated with Tiphareth here, that rules the central Sephiroth. So we have an interaction between the sun and the earth. We also have a cross section of the tree with the rings here indicating maturity and growth, and we've got protective wings of foliage here, as we can see, both top and bottom. It's noted that these wings here are shaped, if you can see, I'll bring this if I can. I don't think I can, but you can see here that the shape of the angel's wings here at the bottom is very much like these wings here, and that is to do with the spiritualization of matter. So I mentioned right at the start that this suit of discs is not just about material things, it's about integrating your material and spiritual paths together, and this is what this is indicating here. This is where all the symbolism plays out. You've also got acorns here representing fertility, and you've got them here at the bottom as well, and indeed here on the right and on the left. So that about sums things up external to this disc. So we're now going to look at what is happening internally, which is a little bit more detailed. We're now going to go on to those features which are internal to this disc here, and I said that the disc itself was whirling, and that is mimicking the nature of nature. So we've got the whirling atom, and on the macrocosmic scale we've got the Milky Way. I mean, obviously the spiritual planes look and are perceived differently to this, but the suit of discs is all about the material plane. So here we have it in both microcosm and macrocosm. So now we've emphasised that this disc is active, that the Earth is active. We've got this inscription here, to Meta Ophion, or he's also been referred to as to Megatherion. And this inscription is on the outer edge of this yellow disc, the yellow representing Tiphereth. So what does this actually mean? Well, we have to look back into myth, and Ophion was the serpent created by this goddess here, which is Eurynomé. Strange pronunciation, but there you have it. And as myth goes, she is fertilized by the serpent, and in the form of a dove lays an egg on the waters, a bit about which Ophion entwines. And from this the whole world issues forth. Now, any sort of mythology is really talking about spiritual. It's talking about spiritual things. So we have the serpent in the Bible, but I won't go through that now. But the whole emphasis of this in relation to this inscription is that it implies that everything arises from this fertilization here, and therefore everything arises that we see from the Ace of Discs, because that is a point of potential. So everything we see in manifestation in the suit of discs arises from the Ace. In this second diagram that I've got for the Two of Discs here, I've just continued this theme. We've got Ouroboros, which is essentially the serpent devouring its own tail. We see that serpent now coming far more clearly in the Two of Discs. We didn't see it in the Ace of Discs. There's only, got to really search for it, but the Two of Discs, it's there. And this is representing essentially the infinite change of life. Again, you've got that sense of a crown on the top there that we talked about earlier in the video when I was talking about the crown here. So all of these cards interlink. I do try and interlink these as much of the deck as I possibly can without making the videos too long. So next we have the decagon here, which is 10-sided. So if we start here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, returning back to origin. The number 10 is associated with the 10th Sephiroth here, which is Malkut, which is the manifestation. So that is a symbolic representation of the fact that the discs are part of the most manifested plane, which is world, which is the fourth world of Osaya here. And we have the two pentagrams, both here in red and in black. So the two 5-sided shapes making up the decagon here, and giving these spokes at the intersections of the points, again symboling the number 10 and the potential of this suit to manifest on the material plane. Inside those we've got the heptagram, which is 7. That's a 7-pointed star. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and returning to the point of origin, so it's the number 7. This is to do with, well, it's the Star of Babylon and relates to the Whore of Babylon, which you see in the Lust card. Now going to take a close-up of this middle bit here. So we see the numbers 6, 6 and 6, and we see a moon here, and this is either a dot or the number 1. So we've got a moon. These represent the testes, the phallus or penis, and you've got the 3D effect here with the moon. So this is the moon here giving a 3D sort of extension of the penis here. So we're looking at sun and moon, male and female, and this idea of fertility yet again. If we consider this uppermost circle here, if we treat that as a dot, then this topmost circle becomes the glyph of the sun, which is a circle with a dot in the middle, and then you've got the moon. So we've got the theme of 666, and also he says that the title here is related to sixes because we've got the 2 times 6. In other words, if you add the first 2 words up, you get a 6-letter phrase, and same here, so 2 times 6. He does go into more complex mathematics, which quite frankly I don't understand. So the 666 is the mark of the beast in the Book of Revelations, which is really just about materialism. There's lots and lots and lots written on 666, but I do have things on my website that really resonate with me with regards to 666. And it's, if we look at this diagram here, we have a cube on the right and the outfolded cube here on the left. So the number 6 is to do with the crucifixion, because it's all about the senses, it's about materialism. That's what Christ was, his sacrifice of the senses to a more spiritual life. And we have the cube here with the 7th side, that lucky 7, which is the side that is hidden within the cube. So the more complete person is a number 7, and the number 6 is someone who is crucified by their senses, and they need to sacrifice the senses to achieve oneness with God. The alternative way that Crowley used these numbers was to count this top inscription here as a 1 and add it to the last 6. So we have 667, which was representative of the Scarlet Woman that we see in the Lust card here. And she rides the beast of Babylon, which is essentially Crowley, and this beast of Babylon is talked about in the Book of Revelations, with these 7 heads related to the 7 chakras, and obviously man has to conquer each of the chakras. Again, we have a serpent-like creature here, which is been throughout the theme of this tutorial. 666 is also the number that is associated with the magic square of the sun. So the divine names associated with the sun have numerological values of 6 or 36. So if we take this square here full of the numbers between 6 and 36, arrange them in a particular fashion, then we get rows here which equal 111 and columns which equal the same. So the sum of the rows or the columns is equal to 666. And it says the name of the intelligence of the sun has a value of 111, which is here, and the spirit of the sun has a value of 666. And these are calculated by writing out the names in Hebrew and then adding up the value of each included letter. So each Hebrew letter can represent both a sound and a numerical value. You can also get magic squares of the various different planets, and you can look at the symmetries of these squares, and that is a whole project in itself. So I thought I'd end the symbolism of the Ace of Discs with this, but again, this is another whole area to look at if you so wish. So I'll next just provide a brief summary of the Ace of Discs, and then we'll move on to the last section of the video, which is to do with divination and the Ace of Discs applied to the Celtic cross. So just to go back over the main points of the card before we go on to the last section. The card denotes the principle of male and female polarities, energies in many ways. So we have the yellow circles of the sun, which is male, and the moon, which is female. You also had the 666 and 667. And we also had the phallus and testes in there as well, and lots of other things for the representation of fertility, such as the acorn clusters here. It's also a symbol of the union between spirit and matter, between Keter and earth, with this being a glyph for the tree of life, with Keter at the top and Malkut at the bottom. So we said with regards to the four worlds, it was in the most material of the worlds, which is Asaya here in the fourth world. And probably the most important point that Crowley wanted to get across was this card represents the new Eon of Horus, with Earth being active rather than passive, and therefore we had the spring green in the card. So those are the main points associated with the Ace of Discs. So the Ace of Discs is the first card out in the Celtic cross spread. It's the dominant or underlying energy of the spread, which is all to do with a new beginning. So it could be a very good time to look for opportunities which will increase both your prosperity in terms of work and bring meaning and balance and harmony in your life at the same time, because this is all about symmetry and balance. If the Ace of Discs is crossing, and this is the current challenging factor affecting your issue, then it could really imply that any new beginnings would really have to be really thought out, and particularly I would encourage this person to look at their incomings and outgoings with regards to their financial situation, to make sure that anything that they are thinking of doing which relates to this spread in terms of their work would be financially viable. So in other words, there could be a situation whereby you're thinking of quitting work, but make sure you have somewhere to go before you jump, and that the place that you're going to is more supportive than where you are now. So it's that sort of thing. With the Ace of Discs in position number 3, our subconscious influences. Subconscious things tend to be suppressed, and therefore it could mean that, well, we want to have a change of direction in our life, in our work, what we do for our for the main body of our day, but we don't really have the confidence or the know-how to actually look for something better, but we know it's there. We just don't really want to push ourselves past sort of difficult blocking emotions and thoughts to actually move our lives forward. So that's subconscious influences. The Ace of Discs appears in position number 4, recent past, influencing situation. It could mean that we've taken a great opportunity recently, and our life is moving forward, and the rest of the spread is to do with how best to use that new opportunity that we've been given, what's ahead in that situation. Or it could mean that if it's reversed, that we've had a situation and we didn't take that opportunity, and now the rest of the spread is indicating where we need to go. So it depends on the dignity as do all of these positions of the card itself. Position number 5, Ace of Discs, could mean in the hopes and goals position that your goal is to be financially rewarded for something that you enjoy doing and is close to your heart. Position number 6, near future, it could mean that you have some financial windfall that's coming, could be an inheritance, and therefore it's time to think about what you might do with that new opportunity, or it could relate to a job. Position number 7, how you're affecting your situation or how you see yourself. This could relate to the meaning that Crowley would like us to delve into more, which is our relationship between us and our environment. So it could be someone that really wants an opportunity to work more closely and be more in harmony with nature. Perhaps they work in the city, they want to get away, they want to feel more balanced, feel more out in the countryside, and that is how they see their life moving forward. Position number 8 here, how others are affecting your situation. If it's reversed here, it could mean that essentially you are seeing work and others are seeing your work as an end in itself. In other words, people at work are not really inspiring you to do your best, and it could mean that someone in work is actually being quite greedy in terms of their input and their demands of you. So it represents disharmony in the workplace, really, if this comes up in a reversed form in position 8. So it's how others are affecting your situation, again depending on the other cards here in the spread. Position number 9 for the Ace of Discs here, your guidance and advice. And this is really the need to take your opportunities when they arise and use them to bring your life into greater harmony and balance, because if you don't, life just goes in a flash. So it's really reminding you to take those great opportunities and go for it when they come up and use them in a positive, constructive way. Finally, we have the card in position 10 here, which is your long-term outcome. So a great card to have. It indicates newfound meaning in your life, where you make use of your opportunities that come your way, implying you will find harmony and balance both inside and out in your spiritual life and in your daily life, and that there will be a harmony and balance between the two. Okay, that concludes this video on the Ace of Discs. I hope it's been of some help. Bye for now.